We call the meeting to order. Chair Stubblefield is absent, so the floor is open for acting chair nominations.
I nominate Mr. Murphy.
Okay, sir. Your second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Control this rowdy crowd. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Board Member Murphy?
Here.
Board Member Herlock?
Here.
Board Member Carmen?
Here.
And Board Member Stubblefield.
Okay. Will the clerk please administer the affirmation to those giving testimony tonight? And will those giving testimony please rise?
Please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm that the testimony you are about to give and the matter now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Tonight, the board is hearing petition number 871, petition of the City of Santa Paula for a regular variance from Air Pollution Control District Rule number 29C with violations of conditions 14 and 16. Pardon? Is there, go ahead, would you ask?
I understand that one or more board members may have visited the site. You should make a disclosure, if so, about what you saw and heard.
To make, I did something unusual. I visited the plant in Santa Paula, and was taken by a tour by Johnny Garifolo. He was very open with everything in the plant, and while we were there, also the general manager Matt Peterson was present. And we started talking about the other plant, the American Water manages, which is in Fillmore. Now, the Fillmore plant has a different system of getting rid of the hydrogen sulfide. It's more of a biological, natural way, which is they have big ponds where they put wood chips, and then the hydrogen sulfide gas, which other gases, enter those ponds through a pipe that branches out in smaller pipes, and they have bibs that the air out, and one way or another, the chips act with the gases, and they decompose, and the end products of the top chips, they don't have any smell, or it's completely clean. And like I said, it doesn't need any chemicals. It doesn't need any electricity. So it's very interesting. What surprised me is that such a nice system, few miles away from our plant here in Santa Paula, they didn't do the same thing in 2009 when they built the plant. In 2009, they opted to put a new system. That's the ARISA filters. And I was shown the ARISA filters, which you see here, I guess in this handout that they gave us. It shows us quite well. This, and actually, it's not much to see. It's just like a magic box that supposed to get rid of the hydrogen sulfide by quantum mechanics. That is exchanges of ions, oxygen minus ion, which is a superoxidized oxygen, reacts with the molecules of the hydrogen sulfide, and the sulfide then precipitate, And if everything goes right, you have the water without hydrogen sulfide. I saw that one. It's the first time I've seen it. I said, well, is there any other place that have a system like that? So I went, of course, to the internet and Google it and see what they have to say.
If, Mr. Kamen, if I could interrupt, I think the purpose is simply to disclose the fact that you had done that. We are a judicial body and are here to judge what the petitioner and the district put before us, other than, and we aren't the executive body that does anything beyond being judges. And I think,
Well, since I went to the plant, I thought I was going to take a good look at what's going on, and that's what I did. But that's basically what I had to say. That I went to both plants and saw the difference between one and the other.
The object of the disclosure is to inform everyone here what you might be basing your decision on. And I think you've done that adequately.
thank you very much, appreciate that. Will the petitioner's representatives please state your names, positions, or job titles for the record, and then present your petition?
Yes, good evening, Acting Chair, members of the board. My name is John Lawson. I am the Interim Public Works Director and City Engineer for the City of Santa Paula.
Hi, my name is Norman Bijot. I am an operations manager for American Water Contract Services Group. I am also the transition manager for the Santa Paula project. I work very closely with Johnny Guardiola, who is the project manager at the facility.
I'm Mike Nunley with MKN and Associates. We're the contract program manager for the city for the water reclamation facility.
Now make your presentation.
These introductions don't quite line up with what's in the draft order, unless I missed something. We have a John Elasia, that's you.
Yes, sir.
And Cesar Hernandez? No. And Johnny Guardiola? Nolan Bigot? Okay. And Mike Nunley? All right, thank you.
Proceed.
Okay. Thank you, Acting Chair. John Lawson, City of Santa Paula. The city and its team of wastewater experts for the water recycling facility, or also what we call the WRF, have been actively working to resolve the current hydrogen sulfide exceedance level. The city's team, I'd like to reintroduce you to them again, is American Water Operation and Management on my left, and Michael K. Nunley and Associates, who performs the day-to-day management and the quality assurance on behalf of the city. Both wastewater experts, we believe as a city, has helped us tremendously in this effort to comply with the hydrogen sulfide exceedance. And without further ado, I'd like to turn this over to American Water to go over the presentation that's before you to describe how the city, on behalf, or American Water on behalf of the city, has been doing in regards to effort, time, and money. For information, the city has expended more than $120,000 worth of expenses to get the hydrogen sulfide exceedance level down. We spent more than 300 man-hours. So since the interim variance that was issued about 2 months ago, we have been working actively to get this under control. So with that, I'd like to turn that over to Norman Bijot to go over the presentation. Thank you.
Council members, thank you. My name is Norman Bijot. Once again, I'm with American Water. I am the operations manager for contract services, and I'm also, yes, it is. Can you hear me now? Okay. The green light's on. And I'm the operations manager for contract services, and I am also the transition manager between the city of Santa Paula and American Water. We put together a presentation for you to basically show you what we've been doing since April 17, 2017, when we first came on site. We took over the operations from another contractor that was there, and so I'm going to review a little bit. Next page. I'm going to do a description of the actual problems that we saw, some of the actions that were taken, discussion of the data that we gathered and the results, and then our recommendations and conclusions of that. On April 11th, the Santa Paula Water Recycling Facility odor system exceeded the 1.2 parts per million that was part of the permit. And the plant was then in violation of District Rule 29C, permit number 08044, Condition 14 and 16, as we know. Condition 14 requires H2S concentrations at outlets of Hawk radial flow activated carbon, which is one of the systems, and also the Arisa ionization oxygen system to not exceed the 1.2. Condition 14 requires that the permittee install, maintain, and operate continuous monitoring system, which we do at the facility, at the outlets of both Hawk and the Arisa units to monitor the H2S continuously. The initial plan that we went over, and I apologize, I forgot my glasses. So bear with me.
We're of an age, we appreciate your difficulty.
Oh, perfect, I can see. Anyway, what we first did, some of our activities, we identify the equipment needed for the data collection. We purchased the equipment. We then identified the locations required for collecting the data. We contacted vendors for system services, Venco Services, and JR Environmental, and they prepared a scope of work to validate our PLC readings, our SCADA system, to make sure that the continuous monitoring system was actually reading accurately. We did data collection at each of the locations identified, and we're going to go through each one of those. We did testing of the system at locations identified, sample collection, and of course analysis of all of those. We did a chemical addition of sodium hypochlorite on site. We also did an anemometer, which does the airflow through the system to determine whether or not we were getting it adequate airflow to each one of the systems that we had. We tracked operations. We had identified possible operational changes in our EQ tanks within the Arisa and Hawk units, at the headworks, at the digester, and also some of the solids handling equipment, also the volumes and flows of each processes. We collected additional data within the system, and this was, once again, flows, pH, DOs, BOD, to identify exactly what we were dealing with. We hired an outside contractor, LamTech Incorporated. It's a specialized unit that does nothing but H2S monitoring. They have 20-plus years of experience in data collection and analysis of H2S. They collected data on multiple parts of the system. They analyzed it, and they put together a report for us. We did weekly progress reports for the Ventura County. We sent a letter of progress report every Monday. Additional work was reviewing operations and maintenance manuals and also system analysis. We wanted to make sure we knew exactly what we were dealing with. As one of the council members says, one of the board members stated, it's a specialized system. It's not in many areas in the country at all. It was one of the first ones that American Water had seen before. So obviously we wanted to know everything about it, how it worked, how it operated, go through each one of the design parts of it, and we did all of that. And that obviously took some time.
Before you move on, what's PLC?
PLC is a programmable logical controller. So basically, it takes the programming and it sends it into a system that breaks it down and it reads it for us. in layman's terms. So it's a technology that engineers design, it sends signals to another system, and basically it creates a logic for us so that we can understand it, which is a SCADA system. You've probably seen SCADA systems. It basically gives us a readout of what part per million it is, or what the DO is, what the temperature is. So it basically takes transfers a reading into a different reading that we can understand.
What about DO
DO is dissolved oxygen.
and BOD?
BOD is biochemical oxygen demand. Next. So these are some of the actions that we took. On April 17th, we became the operations manager of the contractor for the City of Santa Paula. May 10th, the Hawk radial carbon was replaced with 20,000 pounds of Sulfix HC, which is a specific type of carbon. May 1st, and again on May 25th, we had the instrumentation calibrated on the Hawk and the ERISA H2S monitoring. That's a 24-hour monitoring system, so we had it calibrated twice. On the 25th, we had maintenance service on all of the ERISA units by West Coast Air Conditioning. They came in, they changed the plasma bowls, relays, all the filters on the unit to make sure that they were at 100%. They gave us a statement afterwards and paperwork that stated that the system should be operating at 100%. We did source testing on the ERISA and Hawk units by an outside independent contractor, which was Horizon Air Measurement. They came in on the 25th. They found that we were still in violation, and even though we had done all the work that we've done on the Hawk system, changing out the carbon and upgrading the ERISA system with the required needs that it had, we were still in violation. On May 31st, the city petitioned requesting a variance. On June 19th, the temporary variance was granted. And then on June 20th, American Water, with the guidance of the City of Santa Paula and MK Engineering, we began obtaining quotes, purchasing specialized equipment to start this data gathering for the H2S sources, analyzing the source of the problem, and then determining the solutions. I just want to review a little bit of the data gathering that we got. We actually went out to Lemonwood Lift Station. There's 2 lift stations in the city. One barely operates at all. It's very low flow. Lemonwood is the major one there, but it still only has less than 15 to 20% of the flow in the whole city. Most of the city is gravity, so we're talking 80% of the city is gravity flown into the wastewater facility. Only 7 to 10% actually, I believe, comes from Leavenwood. But we wanted to see, what type of sulfides we had in there. So we took liquid samples of sulfides 3 times a day, 3 times a week. We put an odor system in there, which is a specialized unit that runs 24 hours a day continuously, and it reads the H2S activity in there. The results from that showed an average of 4 parts per million, which spikes up to 70, 80. That means that normal days, it only had 4 to 8. So that's a very low number. But at some points, we had higher, depending on how long it stayed in the system. We also did a bar test. A bar test is a specific test for sulfite-reducing bacteria. This is the bacteria that actually reduces the sulfate to help create H2S. And we did a test for that, and we concluded that there was definitely high concentrations of bacteria were present. That's a bad thing, because that means that there's more bacteria in there, and that's what you don't want. You don't want to have the bacteria in there, because otherwise it creates the opportunity for H2S to present itself. During August of 2017, we installed an odor, which is once again a specialized unit that runs 24/7 in both the Hawk and the ERISA. Basically the outflow. I want to say influent and outflow. When I say influent and outflow, I'll let you know whether it's water flow or if it's airflow. On this, it was on the effluent airflow of both of the systems. We placed it in the ERISA and the Hawk to measure the H2S that was coming out of our system after it was supposed to be treated. The data collected showed that we had averages of 4.4 parts per million. That obviously exceeds the 1.2 parts per million within our permit, and spikes up to 6 to 7 parts per million. with averages of 2 to 5 parts per million in the ERISA outlet during the testing period. The next page, data gathering for the Hawk and ERISA. So this is actually what the trending looks like over the period of time. It tells you on the bottom that that's the time limit. It was over a week, and you can see the trend. I know it's not the largest one, but it basically gives us an idea of what our averages is, and then what our peaks are during that period of time that we did that. Yeah, this chart here, this is the odor logger up on the right-hand side there, sir. That little yellow, if you can see that right there, that's called an odor log. That unit measures H2S 24/7. Basically, you can determine whether you want it at a 2-minute interval, a 5-minute interval, or a 10-minute. We had it at a 5-minute interval, and every 5 minutes it would take a reading within this system. This is the Hawk system, and this was the ERISA system. These lines up here, this shows you where basically the average was around 1, 2, 3 to 4 parts per million. We had lower ones here, then it went up a little higher, lower, higher, lower, higher. So the higher peak shows you where the H2S was at parts of that week. And then, of course, down here, the lower parts of where the H2S was that week. But all of them averaged out shows that we were not able to meet our 1.2. Our averages were 4.4 parts per million in the Hawk and 2 to 5 in the ERISA. So it was not working. That basically the bottom line is that I'm trying to state is that during the time that we did this testing, we were not being able to maintain our permit levels, even though both of these systems are supposed to be working at peak performance. Well, the green line, it's really the blue lines. Yeah, the blue lines show you how it goes up and down, how the system, sometimes it was very low, all the way down here, we had 0 at one point, all of a sudden it popped up higher. So you can see at the lower point is 0, and then as it increases, so it bounced around a little bit. That's basically what it shows you. Right here it's 0, and then all of a sudden it went up to 4 or 5. And then it stayed there, and then it dropped down to about 3. And then it went back up and went around 5 or 6 up here. So basically, this is kind of how it went down and dropped up over that week period. So we had some high peaks, and then all of a sudden it dropped down, and then it dropped down even more.
Each of these intervals of tick marks on the horizontal scales a week?
The week was from point A to point B. That was the week. So these are timelines within that week period for the Hawk unit and for the ERISA unit down here. Is there any additional questions on this? Okay. We also did it in our influent manhole. This is the manhole preceding the influent flow to the plant. So we have an influent flow to the plant that has a flow meter on it that tells us how much flow we have. Right past that, we have this influent manhole. So we did liquid samples in that manhole for total and dissolved solids 3 times a week, three times a day, and 3 times a week. We also installed the odor logger in this system over a week period of time, and we measured the H2S. The data collected show we had averages of 19 parts per million average and 40 to 40 parts per million coming into the system. And that's just a picture of the manhole, and then this is the odor log that we put down towards the bottom of it to measure the H2S. So this is the actual odor log, and then this is the base of it, the manhole. Excuse me. Next picture, this is the lift station at the water recycling facility. What we did also liquid samples within the facility. So the manhole that I was discussing is outside the facility. On the outside of this wall, there's another manhole, and then it comes around and it feeds into this lift station here. We took liquid samples there at the lift station 3 times a day, 3 times a week for total and dissolved sulfides. We had them analyzed at FGL, and we found that we had sulfides in the system. We also installed an odor logger in this unit and from July through August, and the data that we collected showed that we had averages of 14 parts per million coming in, which spikes up to 30 to 40. And this here is over the week period of time. This data here, you can see how high it was here, and then how it dropped. And I'm going to explain this drop in just a few minutes. But I want to show, these are the peaks, and then this line here is basically the average of what we found over that week period of time.
The lift station is to pressurize the water so it will go through all the filters in the plant?
No, actually, I'm sorry, sir. The lift station, what happens is the lines coming into the plant are very, very low because everything is gravity. So it's 25 feet down below the surface of the ground. So we have to lift that back up so that we can start it going by gravity through the plant again. So basically, the lift station is just a point where we have pumps that we lift the water up to a higher level, so now it can run through the facility as gravity.
Like a cistern below?
That's correct. It's just a holding, basically a large holding tank. As the water flows in, our pumps turn on depending on the levels, and it pumps it into the screenings, which removes rags and grit, and then the rest of the process is through the facility.
Are there times in the cistern where the pumps are not working, that the water stagnant in the cistern at night or something?
No, actually, we use EQ tanks for that. We have EQ tanks, which are equalization tanks. So what we do is during the day, we take a portion of the water off the major flow, we put it in the EQ tank, so when the flow gets low at night, we can maintain a continuous flow through the facility, so we don't have those big peaks and dips. We have, lower flow at night, but because we're putting water in from earlier in the day, we have a continuous flow. We also decided that we wanted to see what our digesters were doing. These are aerobic digesters, but the design of this facility has placed them underground. Aerobic digesters usually have air going to them, but they're open to the atmosphere. These design do not. They're actually closed. So what happens is you have an aerobic area in the water, but then you have an anaerobic area above the level of the water tank because it can't escape to the atmosphere, so you create a condensed area with H2S. We put the otologgers in there to measure the H2S, and on digester number 1, the data collected show we were averaging 52 parts per million with spikes of 60 parts per million in digester 1. We also put one in digester 2, and we were averaging over 200 parts per million in that part of the system, which spikes up to 300. The way this system works is that we have airflow that gets pulled out of these digesters, and it goes through our systems, the ERISA and the HAWK. What we found out is we were having so much hydrogen sulfide build up in those areas because they had old sludge in there for periods of time that it was actually creating an overload on the system, and the system was never designed for those type of, H2S. So what we ended up doing, and I believe we've discussed that further down, I'll discuss that further down in some of the changes that we made to correct that. We also used another unit. It's called the Jerome J05. This instrumentation measures H2S concentration also, but basically we do it at one point. So the other one does it over a 24-hour period of time. This one is, we monitor it. What is it at right now? So we also did the Jerome at multiple areas also within the facility. We did it in the manholes. We did it in several manholes throughout the facility. We did it in the lift station. And so we wanted to verify that the measurements that we got with the otologger were consistent with the Jerome's measurements, and the data showed basically we got the same thing. We had 20 parts per million with spikes up to 50, which are about average of what we saw with the otologs. Excuse me.
And this digesters has a cover on?
That's correct.
And so the hydrogen sulfide is on the top, and that's the one that it goes to the filter.
That gets sucked right up out of the system into the filters.
By itself, or you use something to push it?
No, actually, there's a constant airflow pressure. There's a pressure. It sucks, the ERISA units suck the air out of those different basins. So we're getting very high, obviously getting very high flows into those units. And they're designed for 10 parts per million or less. That was one of the other things we found out during the data collection, that both the Hawk and the ERISA units are designed for around 10 parts per million. At 10 parts per million, they do a wonderful job. When you start doing 40, 50, 200, or 300 parts per million, there's just no way that they were ever designed for that type of stuff. So that was one of the reasons why they weren't working either. One of the things we decided to do also was to try to do some chemical addition into the facility. So what we did is we set up on August 2017, we began introducing 100 to 120 gallons per day of sodium hypochlorite into the influent manhole, the same manhole I discussed earlier where we were taking the readings, which is located just about 30 feet outside of the lift stations. And we wanted to find out what kind of data we would get. Would it reduce the parts per million? Well, the data collection showed that we had a reduction in averages prior to the sodium hypochlorite, where we're getting 14 parts per million. After we introduced the sodium hypochlorite, we dropped it down to 8 parts per million. And prior, we were getting 30 to 40 parts per million, and we got it to less than 20. So this definitely shows that applying sodium hypochlorite will definitely reduce the effect of H2S on the system. And that's something that, obviously we needed time to collect data and to see whether it works. So we do know now that it does work. We wanted to do it as a test to see if it's very close to the facility. Usually it takes a period of time for it to contact the H2S and break it down. We found that within 30 feet, if we did it, we could break it down somewhat. But if we move it out further into the lifts, into the collection system, there's a potential that we can even reduce it further. And I'm going to discuss that later on in some of the conclusions.
Is that something you can do within the existing permit?
Yes, that wouldn't affect our wastewater permit for the state.
But doesn't sodium hypochlorite gives off a chlorine-like smell? Pretty strong.
Depending on the amount that you put in there, usually it breaks down. If you put too much, obviously, yeah, you'll get a lot of chlorine smell in there. But where we were injecting it towards the bottom of the lift state, the manhole, basically just above the water flow, so we had plenty of room before it would dilute very quickly into the wastewater and be used up prior to getting any real smell. Oh, I'm sorry. These are some of the operational activities and changes that we made at the facility. Excuse me? Oh.
Saying that when they're changing one smell for another smell.
Yeah. These are some of the operational changes that American Water did on site to try to cut down on the H2S. The EQ basins, they were normally under operation, so what we did is we drained them because we knew that they were being used for years to, collect water and put it back at night. So what we decided to do is drain them, clean them out to make sure that there was nothing inside of it so that any years of buildup that might have been there that might have created H2S no longer going to be there. So we drained them all, we cleaned them out very well, and that helped. We did some maintenance on the Hawk blowers. There was 2 blowers on the Hawk, 1 blower on the Hawk system and 2 blowers on the ERISA units that we rebuilt and made sure that they were, 100%. We also calibrated the instrumentation there. Return activated sludge. This is one of the things that we talked about. Return activated sludge is basically a very oxygenated bacteria that we normally return to the facility anyway, but in a different area. We decided we wanted to try to return it to the influent of the plant. It's highly oxygenated, and it also has a lot of bacteria, and in hopes that it would help break down that H2S. And we have found out that that is actually helping right now, and so we're continuing to do that. We changed our sludge management. There used to be 3 digesters online, which of course with 3 digesters, if you have that area in between the water level and the top of it, you're going to create your own H2S. So we dropped that down from 3 to 2. We did a sludge inventory reduction. We removed as much older sludge as possible. We increased oxygen to the system, and this changed the sludge characteristics, and that also reduced some of the odors. We replaced covers on headworks, belt presses, and odor control systems. We did a lot of house cleaning. There was some old grease and oils and other organic material within the headworks. We pressure washed all of that to remove that, to make sure we controlled odors within the building. And then we started the sodium hypochlorite addition to the influent. One of the other things that I discussed earlier, we brought in an H2S expert, basically an independent contractor. We wanted to verify not only that we were doing our job properly, that we were using the equipment that we had purchased or the city had purchased properly. We wanted to get their recommendations. So we hired Lamtech, which is an independent odor and hydrogen sulfide specialist. They monitored the sulfide conditions at the facility. They collected data at multiple areas within the system as we did. They did an analysis of all of the H2S. They also reviewed all the operational manuals, and then they gave us a summary and an evaluation of the system conditions, a review and report of the potential short and long-term corrections actions, which we have in our recommendations and conclusions. I just want to show you, this is an actual this is a cost breakdown from when we started approximately 3 months ago. The work performed, we did installation of new carbon at $47,000. We rebuilt the recent Hawk systems. That was $3,600. We had the H2S monitoring system calibrated twice for $980. Lamtech came in, independent professionals, $4,200. We had FGL do a numerous amount of laboratory analysis for us. That was $8,500. We spent just $64,000 just on some of the work that we performed. We also purchased the equipment required for us to be able to collect this data. The Jerome J605, very beautiful analyzer, very expensive, $18,000. The Odolog units, 2 of them at $4,300. The anemometer that measures the airflow, $923. The BART test for salt-reducing bacteria was $382. Subtotal is $24,000 for just the equipment, and then just the man hours that we have put in there. American Water has put in over 120 hours, and that hourly rate is for our laborers. So obviously there was management involved in much of this, so that number's a lot higher, but I wanted to give you a rough idea. MKA Engineering spent at least 40 hours, if not more. The City of Santa Paula employees, both the engineer and the environmental regulatory, Caesar, regulatory compliance, put many hours in. And then, of course, we had Tom Peterson, which I believe came before the board at a previous time. He was an independent contractor that we hired, and he put at least 50 hours into this. Total, we have about $119,000, and this is just in 3 months that we spent on it. So I just wanted to show you that we've not only spent a lot of man hours, but we've spent a lot of time on equipment and data collection. So I think that shows you that we definitely have a great interest in making sure that we correct this problem and get it, to where it needs to be. These are some of our recommendations and conclusions. We combined our recommendations with Lamtech's, and we came up with this. We obviously obtained the data from all the equipment that we purchased. We did the analysis on the samples taken at multiple locations. We show you how the current hydrogen sulfide facility that's coming in the facility is much higher than the operational design of what we have right now. And we did many operational changes within the system, which has helped. American Water is recommending, first of all, one other thing I didn't mention, that I had the carbon that we just replaced in May analyzed, and we found that 2/3 of it is already spent, which means that this carbon's not going to last much. And that was only, May, June, July, August, September, so less than 4 months. We've used 2/3 of that. That was $47,000. That's been used up. We're going to have to replace that now. That's going to cost probably another $20,000, $100,000 at least. We did the operational changes to reduce the freeboard area between where the level of the liquid is and where the top of the basin is. That has reduced the H2S levels in there, which is reducing what's going into the systems that we have now. We need to do additional studies on chemical addition further up the collection system. We know what it does at the facility. We need time to now find a location within the gravity system that is not only just safe, because this is a chemical, we got to make sure that it's fenced in. We have to make sure that we have eye washers and showers, and we have to make sure nobody can get inside that facility. And then we want to make sure the right location so that when we administer it, it has the right detention times and the right amount of sodium hypochlorite so that when it gets to the plant, we have less or no hydrogen sulfide in the system. So that's going to take a little bit of time for us to be able to, collect that information. And then we're obtaining quotes right now, as one of the board members says, for a biofilter system. That might end up being our last line of defense. We're looking at quotes right now. Obviously, that's going to take additional time. We're going to need to, design it. We're going to need funding, and then we're going to need to pilot test it also. So I'm hopeful that you'll give us that time for that. Thank you.
Do any of the board members have further questions of the petitioner?
It's probably in here, and I've just missed it, but what is the proposed term of this variance?
The term we're requesting is a year. And we walk through in the letter from John Elassen, dated the 18th. We walk through what that year will allow us to do. First, the city operates on a fiscal year budget that runs from July through June. So by taking through the end of this year for analytical testing and alternative evaluation, covering some of the items Norm discussed, like looking at possibly chemical feed farther up the collection system, identifying where these high levels of sulfides could be coming from, so identifying possibly some source control measures if we can find a culprit, if you will, looking at different alternatives, then performance testing of the technologies from January through March 2018, planning and design for the treatment system April through June. That puts us in good position then for budgeting for purchase and installation of that equipment in the July through August timeframe. And in many cases, the equipment we're looking at, like for example, the biofilters, those often are vendor-provided packages. The installation on those doesn't require a ton of installation time or a lot of buried piping or that sort of thing. So we'd be looking for a smaller footprint type solution than, say, what Fillmore has currently, just because it'd be easier to retrofit that at the plant site. But we want to make sure we're very conscious of the city's need to keep their operation and maintenance costs down. So getting this time to look at these technologies and put good information together will allow them to make a good life cycle cost decision moving forward.
Is the schedule driven? It sounds like the potential solutions are driven to some extent or large extent by budget. Is the schedule driven by budget?
It's definitely one of the drivers, but we feel that year is still is an aggressive but achievable schedule to do what we need to do. Sulfides are challenging to chase in a sewer collection system, and we'd like to have some time to be able to identify what the sources might be of these elevated sulfide levels before we jump right into a solution.
Do you anticipate that you'll need to modify your permit with these changes?
I'll answer that. Absolutely. One of the things that we want to look at also is our current H2S monitoring system. We do not believe is adequate. We'd like to purchase, which Lamtech has given us some information on. We'd like to change that, and if we change that, we understand from Mr. Searcy that we're going to have to modify our permit because it basically states what type of monitoring system we have now. So we might have to change that. We might have to also, if we did go to a biofilter, that's going to be a different type of system that we would use. So we would definitely need to request a change in the permit there. And we've already talked to Dan about that. We realize that there's deadlines on those also, and that we would have to perform, paperwork prior to that to initiate these permits.
The historical aspect of this, it looks like the city kind of lost control of the previous contractor in terms of what they were doing. You have some different approach. I'm impressed with American Water, but do you have a way to independently make sure that they're under control?
Yes, we do have our wastewater experts surrounding us now than before. What happened with the previous operator under a different contractual arrangement is that I can't comment on, but I do know we currently have a great group of wastewater experts in American Water. And to answer your question, how we're going to assure that is we hired Michael Nunley and Associates to be our program manager to do the quality assurance of that. So that's why we have Michael Nunley here to help the city staff in making sure that the control is there this time around.
Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Kamen, do you have any questions?
I have some comments. It seems to me that the plant has I'm going to say it's a Corolla car, a Toyota Corolla, when what you need is a Ford truck with a 150 engine. And sure, no matter how, if you improve the gasoline, shirk the system for batteries, and then put this and that, it goes a little bit faster, But would it satisfy at the end? And then you might end with a hybrid that you have to have all those hypochlorites that's going to be constantly using, and fixing the APCD filter that no one knows exactly how it works. And when I say no one, is because in the United States, the first place that they used it was in Nevada, in a plant there in the town of Goodyear. And there was a small plant, and I couldn't even get hold of them because they only have one man working on it. And I couldn't find anyone, and then they said, well, you want to find some expert, contact the county of Ventura. So we are the expert on the APCD filters in the United States, because and that one you'll find it, because we are the only ones in page 1 of when I ask APCD filters to remove H2S using superoxidized oxygen plasma. Oh, well, we have the interim vial from the Ventura County, and then we have another one from County of Ventura, and another one here. Everything, page number 1, we are the expert on it. How did Santa Paula end with a system like that? Well, I don't know, but I tell you, they had a neighbor that was having a system that worked exceedingly well. It was a biological system that I visited, and I said it consisted of ponds that the only thing you had to do is the park department bring ships every few months, drop it in, and then the whole thing kept on working. No hypochlorite, no electricity, no exchanges of ions, and it was fine. I don't know if I know when I went there, I found out that the city the county has a lot. Well, the city of Santa Paula has a lot of land that they could put those ponds if necessary. Whether they'll have the money to do it, I don't know. But if they keep with this system, I think the only thing that's going to happen is that they're going to keep on trying to improve it and adding more filters and changing the light bulbs that these things require, and muddle along and go from there. And I think a lot has to do with the company that sold the system this bill of good to the city of Santa Paula was a company on PERC. And PERC hadn't done anything like that. I don't know why. They said, let's try this one, which was absolutely new, and no one had tried it. And now American Water is paying the consequences of having a system that, of course, they work for they work for Santa Paula, so they say that they're going to repair it. But I know that deep down they must say, "Wow, what a hell of a system you got involved with." Anyway, that's my comment.
I have a few questions. And one thing I think it's just been alluded to, that it seems very problematical that here we go and we've got a system that isn't built to handle all the hydrogen sulfide, yet up until the week before the city of Santa Paula buys the system, it was passing all the tests. Do you have any logical explanation for that, how that could have happened?
Well, actually, I don't. But what I can say is the city of Santa Paula in the last couple of years has done quite a bit of work on their collection systems. Where at one time the systems were not contained, they had breaks and leaks in them. They now have liners or new systems in there, which now can trap that H2S, where at one point they could have released it or at least let oxygen into the system. I don't know that that's the case. We weren't here then. We didn't do any data collection at the time, but I discussed this with Stan Cowan from Dan Searcy's department when he came out in May, and that was one conclusion that we came up with. Now, we don't know if that's correct or not, since we have no data from before that except for that once a year with Horizon. So that's the only thing that I can potentially think of.
Okay. Other question, it's just more for my personal information here rather than going to the issues that you've got, like at the Lemonwood pump station, averages of 4 points per million, but yet it spikes up to 70 to 80 points. What causes huge spikes like that?
That's a good question. Mike, I think, is best to answer that.
Sure, I'll jump into that. The first answer is we don't know yet. That's one of the things we need to determine is why do we see that in the system? And it's just difficult to say without going out and kind of doing the legwork. Hydrogen sulfide, like gas sampling of hydrogen sulfide, can be very challenging. The city's bought a lot of really good equipment. And American Water has some very good equipment now that did not have the plant, as far as we know, did not have in the past. So, we have the ability to go out and really try to nail that down. We think that's a critical question for all this, is how can we try to control the sources of hydrogen sulfide coming into the system?
I mean, what would be the source? I mean, you think of the system you're doing, it's people flushing the toilets. Unless you got a lot of sick people there, why would you have the big bumps like that? Is that the source of the hydrogen sulfide, or where else does it come from?
Sure, speculation on our part. But if there were someone discharging to the sewer system that maybe should not be, that could be a source. We don't know that, so I don't want to say that we know that, but we need to do some research to determine where this could be coming from, because it's higher than we would expect from domestic sewage.
Okay. And if it was being dumped there or something, that would explain why it wasn't there in years past, type of thing. When you've got pump stations like Lemonwood and the manholes and everything that have these spikes of high hydrogen sulfide, I assume they're closed in, those spikes aren't getting out into the public?
That's correct. They're not. They're being maintained in the system. If they were, we wouldn't be seeing them down at the wastewater facility. Somebody would be complaining, and we don't get in very little, if any, complaints at all within the city for hydrogen sulfide.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. that at one time, when you were taking the grab samples, on page 5 of the order here, you had two of the 6 were just dramatically different from the other 4. Now, that's at the same place, kind of. Why, if you're testing, do you get that huge a variance?
We questioned that ourselves. Now, this is not us testing. It was an outside lab. It was a grab sample that was collected. We discussed that with lab tech, and we can tell you how it can happen. I don't know how this happened, but we can tell you how it can happen. If I take a test on one sample and it's 1.2, then I change and go to another sample that's 15.5. I go back and I sample the next sample. What I leave is some residue from that 15.5 on there, and that transfers onto the next sample. And now, if you do that back and forth, you can see why the first one was very low, but then subsequent ones all of a sudden got higher. That is a potential reason. I don't know that that's it. I wasn't at the lab, so I can't verify that, but a lot of times human error creates these problems more than we know. And I will say that I worked at labs many years, so I do know that that's one way that it can happen. I don't know that it happened here, but that is something that we considered.
Okay. Any other questions but from members of the board?
What do you expect was going to happen in the future? Are you going to stay with this? Well, this is too early to ask, but are you going to? Do you have any dates? What do you think? You're going to take some action?
Sure. And what I'd like to do is direct you to the letter from John Eliason, dated the 18th. So what we propose is analytical testing and alternative evaluation now through the end of December. Performance testing of the technologies from January through March. Planning and design for the treatment system, April through June. Installation, startup, and commissioning of the treatment system, July through August next year.
Are you going to give us a letter of that?
There is a letter already submitted to staff as part of the variance.
Actually, Mr. Chair, members of the board, in the order here on page 12, page 12, the increments of progress, county staff has put those dates in here, and we agree with them, and will comply with these increments of progress.
Any further questions? Does Mr. Kamen, any further questions? Okay. Does the district have any questions of petitioner?
I think Norman and I have talked about this quite a bit. The only thing that I'm concerned about is that there were H2S levels coming into the plant that were at a certain level for a number of years, and now all of a sudden they're very high, and that's very puzzling. It's obvious that they've spent a lot of time and money to try to figure out what the problem is, and they've helped it somewhat, but obviously they're not going to be able to pass the source test right now, and that's puzzling because why did it pass all the other tests? But they've certainly done a number of things, and I'm hoping that what they do in the future is going to work for them. The problem is basically you have a system designed for a maximum of 10 parts per million, and you're getting a lot more than 10 going in. So it's just not going to work. But no, I don't have any other questions. I'm just hoping that we'll figure out why the influent coming into the plant is in the past year and a half is orders of magnitude higher than what it was.
It was only in the last year It was 1.6, and then it jumps to, what is it, 16. That's very unusual. Unless, that's happens only when you put a petroleum facility, refinery facility close by, or, you put a cattle ranch next door, or something like that. But beside that, which we don't have in Santa Paula, there's no reason for a jump like that. I think that it was something that was progressing from year to year, and it wasn't recorded correctly. That's the only thing I think it could have happened.
Do we have any more questions of the staff?
Yeah, I have, not sure this is a question for the district or just a discussion with the board and with Robert. It's pretty common for petitioners to cite, corporate financial decisions for the approach they take and what they're able to do. And we could always propose very expensive solutions, but they're not practical. But I don't recall ever having a case where a fiscal year type schedule was possibly driving. And I'm wondering, I don't think we have anything in the California laws that say we treat cities differently in that respect, but do you have any comment?
I'm not aware of it, and normally for the county, by a 4/5 vote, they can change budgeting at any time during the year. So I'm not sure whether that condition holds any water.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about that particular issue myself.
Did the district in setting forth the timelines and the increments of progress set those forth using the budgeting of the city of Santa Paula in consideration?
There was a letter that the city sent to us, I think it was in April. Was it April? No. Well, so anyway, there was a letter where they had a timeline in it. There are a number of things that are on the timeline, like, they're going to have to complete the testing. Even if they have the money right now in their hands, you wouldn't go buy anything right now until you knew what you needed to buy. So there may be a couple of months in there of maybe extra time, but I don't see it as we're just going to sit around until June and then all of a sudden we're going to fix the problem. I mean, they're going to be doing quite a bit between now and then. They're going to have to do design planning. They're going to have to finish the testing. They're going to have to, if they add a different control system, a different type, they're going to have to get a permit from us, and that takes time. I mean, that's going to be, at the best case scenario, it's going to be several weeks for them to get a permit from us. So no, I mean, there is, I suppose there is a little bit of consideration for the budgeting cycle of this city, but given how long things are going to take and how long things usually take, I don't see that plays a big part in this.
Okay. This question I've got coming up probably should have been asked at the interim variance hearing, but I didn't see it or think of it at that time. The petitioner has essentially in their presentation admitted a violation of condition 16. However, what they were charged with is that they were not operating their operations violated condition 16, and as I'm reading 16, it says the analyzer shall be installed, maintained, operated, and calibrated according to the manufacturer's specifications. And we don't have any, we haven't had any evidence of any manufacturer's specifications, so in actuality, the district hasn't presented any evidence of any violations of condition number 16 that I am aware of. However, there has been an admission of violation of 16, but I would think, at least in the future, you need to be a little bit more specific if you're alleging a violation, to put evidence of that violation before this board.
We do know that they have monitors there, and the monitors, based on grab samples and based on the source tests, aren't readings that are anywhere close to what the samples have said.
But
yeah.
that in and of itself is not a violation of 16. You need to, they needed to be doing something where they were operating out of accordance with manufacturer's specifications for there to be a violation.
Yeah.
As I say, just look at it more carefully.
Yeah, and had I written that permit condition, I would have included language that would have said that it should be, you know.
Yeah, but you can't.
Right.
You can't allege then
Gotcha.
violations against what you would have written. Does anybody in the public have any questions, comments?
One came to my
Okay.
mind. It's in the draft, in the letter here, the draft regular variance or number 831 in page 8. They say American Water has been evaluating the additions of biological controls, the process changes, and existing controls are unable to achieve compliances with the permitted hydrogen sulfide limit. My question is, how far have you gone there? Have you started it, or is something is way up in the future? I think the first thing get started in something like that, but I'd like to see what your ideas are.
I'm sorry, I'm not exactly sure what you're discussing, sir. Is it within the variance itself?
Yeah, on page 8.
Page 8? The top, I have a copy here.
Yeah. Yeah, that one. American Water has been evaluating the addition of is it first paragraph?
Yes. Actually, yes, we have been evaluating it, and I discussed it in the presentation that we did do some addition, chemical addition, biological controls. We changed some of the processes within the facility. We return activated sludge. We made some solids handling changes within the system so that we took out a lot of the old solids and we refreshed it with newer solids and added air to it. So that's kind of the biological processes changes that we've done, and we're going to continue to do that and monitor it.
If you're thinking anything of the ponds that they have in Fillmore or something like that too? Or?
Yeah, oh yeah, no, definitely. That is definitely one of our recommendations is to obtain quotes, start looking at areas within, outside of our facility for areas where we can put it in, what piping would need to be needing, can we tie into the existing duct work that we have? So that is something that we will definitely be doing. As we're doing all this other stuff, we'll be also doing that.
Okay, but yeah, and I didn't see any specific.
Any further questions by members of the board, members of the public?
This is just a clarification. I think that there's a typo in the draft order. Maybe you already caught it, Chris, but in the very first paragraph.
Page what?
The first page, paragraph
Okay.
1.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
It says on March 23rd, 2015.
Yeah.
We got that? Okay.
Okay. That'll be corrected. I will therefore close the hearing. Is there any discussion by the board?
I'm fairly impressed by what American Water has done since we granted the interim variance, and And this presentation is one of the best I've seen. It's very professional, I think. I don't have any problems with, I will not have any problems with this.
Yeah, I agree with you.
You want to move?
Yeah, all right.
I move we accept the petition, grant the variance as written with one typo change.
I'll second that. Call the roll.
Board Member Murphy,
Aye.
Board Member Herlock,
Aye.
and Board Member Carmen.
Aye.
Petition number 871 has been granted by the board. Is there any general public comments at this time?
Keep up the good work.
Okay.
Yeah.
For your time, and I appreciate the time that you've given us this evening, and I can guarantee American Water will do everything they can to make sure we get back into compliance as quickly as possible.
You have to do detective work, finding out what's happening. Was your hydrogen sulfide? Why you're getting 40, 50 parts per million? Somebody